in the Bible and in many religious texts, and that he didn't necessarily have the facts straight. So what was the fallout of all of that?
Well, it's interesting you say the expert thing, because I literally was asked to do it 24 hours beforehand. So I had like the least amount of preparation going into it. And I was okay with that because I'd listened to Billy Carson. Well, and I listened to the stuff he'd said. So I knew enough about the ways that he'd articulated things about the ancient Near East and the Bible and Christianity to know enough that his level is pretty surface. But the fallout was that not only did he not want us to release the conversation, but then he started throwing out cease and desist letters. And then he started, trying to sue people. So, I mean, I was never worried because I'm a Canadian, and anybody who's tried to sue internationally knows that.
Good luck.
Yeah, right. Yeah. As far as I understand it, he would have had to file a claim in a Canadian court that would have been reviewed to have legal precedence. That he'd have to prove that he could win.
What was his argument?
Apart from the fact that he was embarrassed that he lost?
Well, yeah, that's not really an argument, right?
Well, the cease and desist letter, the cease and desist letter said, I don't want you to use my name or my face in anything going forward, and anything you've used up until this point, you need to remove. And I was given 24 hours notice to do this.
But if you're a public figure, he's clearly a public figure. Is that even? Can you actually say no?
No, you can't do it.
So what was does he have a lawyer that wrote this cease and desist? Is he a lawyer?
No. So he actually, it's interesting because Mark Menard, who was the guy who hosted this interaction, he sent Mark a handwritten one. And then he eventually gave Mark an official one from his lawyer. So I actually was sent one by his lawyer, which I, screenshotted, posted publicly online and said, I'm going to ignore this. And then, but he'd sent Mark, who was the podcast host, as far as I'm aware, numerous cease and desists, and Anton, who was the media manager. He'd sent a number of cease and desists.
It's unfortunate.
It is unfortunate.
When you get caught with your pants down, you're supposed to say, I got caught with my pants down.
Yeah.
That's what you're supposed to do. It's the only, especially if you're public, it's very clear that you're incorrect.
Well, the irony of this situation is if he just kind of left it, it probably wouldn't have made anywhere close to the splash that it's made. And we told him that. We said, hey, Barbra Streisand effect is going to happen.
Yeah.
You're a big enough personality that if I make a video and say, hey, I had this conversation, didn't go well for Billy, and Billy doesn't want it released, that's going to start to gain traction sooner or later. Yeah.
It's, the problem is to really delve into these subjects. It takes a tremendous amount of research, years and years and years of research. You really have to know what you're talking about. Most of us don't.
Well, and especially with languages.
Yes.
We didn't get into it. I hoped to have, in our initial conversation, kind of pressed him a little bit more on the more overt things he'd said about Greek and Hebrew and Sumerian, because I've studied a number of ancient languages. And when you study the languages, you realize the complexities of these things. And so when someone hasn't and they're making statements that are obviously indicative of someone who hasn't studied them, it's super apparent.
Right.
And so I think it's one thing to be making claims about, say, Christian history or the Bible, but when you start to get into linguistics and philology, it gets messy. And if you don't know what you're talking about, it gets really apparent really fast.
So the gentleman who brought the two of you together, what was his goal? What was he trying to do, and how did he approach you?
Yeah, so he's friends, or I should say was friends. He was friends with Billy. They live in the same neighborhood.
Oh, boy.
So it's actually become really, it's become pretty rough for him. So he released a video yesterday, which I think people should go and check out, where he kind of gives his perspective. He's been friends with Billy for years. He was at Billy's wedding. Oof. Billy had 15 people at his wedding.
Oof.
Mark was one of them. And they live in this community in Florida. Their sons are friends. Their wives would hang out.
Oof.
And Mark told me, he's like, I've been hearing Billy say, he wants to debate. Nobody will debate him for years. And so as far as I think Mark was concerned, he was giving Billy the opportunity that Billy had told a lot of people he wanted.
Right.
And so he, this was set up in that Mark and Billy have been talking. They've been on each other's podcasts in the past, and they've been friends, but more like business colleagues. Like Mark has come out and said, I hadn't really gone into the stuff he'd said about Christianity or ancient religions or whatever that much. Mark he's a Christian. He has like a public profession of faith, and him and Billy had talked about the fact that they wanted to talk about like faith stuff and some of their differences, and that that Mark was kind of prepping for this, and his media manager Anton had sent him some of my stuff and said like, Wes has done some stuff on some things that Billy has talked about, and maybe you should look up some of this stuff, read into it. And Mark, very last minute, was like, well, I feel inadequate. Do you think I could just ask Wes? And so he DM'd me on Instagram and just kind of laid this out like, hey, I'm going to have Billy in my studio in 24 hours. I can tell him you're coming, I can tell him who you are. I can like give him your background, but would you be willing to come? And so that's what I did. And so that's how it got set up.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but was Billy aware that this was going to be a debate, or did he think it was going to be just a discussion? Like, what did he think it was going to be?
No, he'd been given all of the prerequisites. Like, he knew we're going to go over some of his stuff that he'd said about Christianity, that I was going to come in, who I was, what my name was, some of my background, and that part of the conversation was going to be me kind of asking him some clarifying questions and rebutting some of the things that he said. So you didn't watch the 3-hour live stream that he did you?
I watched chunks of it.
Okay.
I watched a little bit, I'm like, oof, and then I shut it off, and then I watched a little bit more, oof.
Yeah. So unfortunately, Billy there says he had no idea going in. And I mean, as Mark said in his video that he released yesterday, I mean, that's patently false. He knew what it was going to be, who was going to be involved, and even some of the things that we would be talking about.
Okay. And he also was claiming that it wasn't a debate, that he had been involved in debates before, and that he would prepare for debates, but this is something he didn't prepare. But again, it's like, if you ask me about things that I know about, you can wake me up out of a full sleep and give me a couple seconds. I'll go, oh, okay. This is what it is.
Yeah.
If you know, you know.
And it wasn't a debate in one sense. Like, it wasn't. Like, we didn't do, opening statements and cross-examination and rebuttal.
Right.
It really was a conversation.
Right.
And it only kind of turned into a debate in the sense that Billy, I think, got caught out. And so the things that were talked about kind of showed that, that he needed to go on the offense.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, again, it's all very unfortunate, but the good part of it is I was introduced to you and your work. And
there you go.
Very, very extensive and very fascinating. And the videos that you sent me on Instagram, I watched both of those today as well.
Awesome.
So really, really interesting stuff. And your knowledge of the history of the biblical texts and Codex Sinaiticus and all these different things, very, very fascinating stuff. So let's just get into your background. Like, how did you get started in your research, and how did you get into this?
Yeah, so I grew up in a Christian home. My parents were missionaries. So I was born in Pakistan and spent a portion of my childhood in the Middle East with my parents working in Amman, Jordan. And then we came back from the Middle East when I was pretty young. And so I grew up in this very diverse home in the sense that my mom was a missionary kid who grew up in India. And so we had a lot of worldview kind of perspectives represented in our home. Like, I often say we had the Bhagavad Gita and the Book of Mormon and the Quran on the shelf.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and I think, that always, although my parents were never overt with this kind of stuff, they always had the perspective that, we're Christians. We believe that this worldview perspective is true, but hey, this stuff isn't scary. This stuff isn't, off limits. We can investigate these things. And they never said that outright, but that I always felt this kind of attitude of that kind of perspective. And, having been exposed in majority Muslim contexts and seeing that kind of stuff, and my mom having a a pretty good knowledge growing up in India of things like Hinduism and Sikhism and that. I don't know how much of the kind of testimony stuff you watched of mine, but just before my 12th birthday, I actually was diagnosed with a neurological condition that left me paralyzed from the waist down.
Yeah, I did see all that.
Yeah. So that's a condition that's called acute transverse myelitis, which I often say is a word you can forget as soon as you hear it because it's a complicated one. But what happened was that I had the flu and my body's immune system attacked the nerve endings at the base of my spinal cord and caused swelling and cut off the communication between my brain and my legs. And
instantaneously, right?
Yeah, basically. I'd gone down for a nap. I was camping out in the bathroom floor for flu reasons. And when I woke up, about 30 minutes later, I couldn't feel my legs. And so, yeah, that's the acute part of the acute transverse myelitis, was that it was basically instantaneous. And that's what made the diagnosis as severe as it was. Like they said, there's a 30% chance. It was like a small percentage of a probability that I would recover, but a much higher percentage that there would be a lot of either complete paralysis for the rest of my life or some kind of issues with walking. It's related to like diseases like multiple sclerosis in that it's neurological and it affects that kind of thing. And 1 month from the day that I woke up and couldn't feel my legs, I woke up on a Saturday morning, got out of bed, walked over to my wheelchair and sat down.
1 month?
1 month, yeah. January 8th to February 8th, exactly.
Very fortunate.
You're telling me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What treatment did they give you?
So initially they gave me steroids to reduce the swelling, but so I spent 11 days in the hospital being overseen by pediatric neurologists and specialists in this because it's a very rare condition. And so they were studying me and they gave me steroids and they did some other tests, but really there was no true kind of treatment in that. So I was doing physiotherapy. I would be pulled out of gym class in school, but it was a little bit of a joke. Like, can you move your legs? You know, can you? It was.
Could you move anything?
No, nothing.
Could you feel anything?
No. In fact, when I was in the hospital, I'd wake up and there'd be pinpricks in my legs because they'd be testing where the reactions were, and they'd have used a syringe. And so I'd wake up and there'd be these tiny little pinpricks in my legs because they'd been testing while I was asleep to see what the kind of, whether it was registering neurologically with anything. But I couldn't feel anything. I was fully a paraplegic.
Whoa.
Yeah, but going back to that, like, so I experienced this, what I consider to be a true supernatural experience in that I walked into the hospital to the doctors that had overseen me, and they were the first ones that used the word miracle. They said, we really don't have any type of medical explanation. And mainly because there was no atrophy. Because of the cutoff of the communication, my muscles in those 30 days were fine. And it's a short amount of time, but they said there should be something, and we're picking up nothing.
That's crazy. Because I've broken limbs before and had them in casts, and just in the 6 weeks that you have a cast on, you have massive atrophy.
Yeah. So that was the kind of predication for them using the word miracle. And so that's kind of, it marks this, what I do consider to be like this supernatural, something happened. But
did you feel like that was like a calling that like led you to a very specific mindset after that?
It's an interesting way of putting it. I mean, as much as you could at 12 years old.
Right. But it must have had a significant impact on your psyche and your perceptions.
Yeah, well, it definitely led to things like later in life, I got very involved in athletics, in track and field. And part of that was feeling a conviction that I knew what it was like to not be able to wake up and walk out of the room.
Right.
And so taking that pretty seriously and competing competitively well into university. Because even though, I wasn't the most naturally talented individual on the team, I felt like a motivation to be able to, okay, I don't want to waste this.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And then later on, in terms of your original question, the difference in that was that I realized, okay, there's something out there. Something happened that I can't totally explain on naturalistic terms. But how do we go from that to saying, okay, well then this worldview is correct? And so despite, being raised in a Christian home, I felt like my parents telling me what was true is not the worst reason to believe it, but it's also not the best. And so as a teenager, I did a lot of kind of soul searching. And like I said, I was able to do that to a certain level of degree because of the openness within my household, where I pulled the Quran off the shelf and I read it, front to back, just trying to figure out, okay, what's going on here? What's all this about?
Right.
And it was through that period of like searching, and it wasn't a crisis of faith. That would be an over-exaggerated term. But it was kind of
an inspiration of faith, perhaps.
Maybe, yeah. Digging through, okay, well, what do these guys believe?
Right.
What does this perspective hold?
Right.
And that was about a period of about a year and a half. And at the end of that, I did truly feel that, okay, well, I think in the ways that in my limited ability as a teenager to investigate these things, I think that Christianity is true. But it wasn't until I went to university where I was engaging with people of other faith perspectives in Toronto at York University, where I was talking to Muslims and Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses and atheists, run the gamut. Mm-hmm. And I was having these conversations and I was expressing kind of my perspective on what I believed. And they would say things like, well, that sounds great, Wes, but, that's all the Bible. You can't trust that. And so that's where I started to take the...
Do Mormons say that to you?
Well, yes.
That's kind of crazy.
Yeah. Well, in the sense that,
the Mormon one is the craziest one.
Yeah.
Because we know who wrote it.
Yeah.
And he's a shady dude.
He is a shady dude. Well, no, they did in the sense that the Book of Mormon trumps the Bible. So they would believe, I think it's the 10th article of the Mormon Church, is that they believe the Bible insofar as it is translated. And so they have this perspective that there's been things that have been affected.
And all I'm going to say is, look, and we can go into some of the books that were removed from what we know as the modern day Bible, but I read through the Book of Enoch multiple times. And I'm not saying that these things are angels. Okay, that's not at all what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that depending on where you are in regards to your whole perspective on whether or not God exists, like I believe in God, I'm a Christian. There has to have been, and there's admissions that there was other creations that God made, but that we were the most prized creation. And so I think that this can open up a bigger topic of discussion. What I will say is that what's been interesting is, and I've had a mass array of people that have come in, right? Like we have people that come in that claim that you can use this ability to basically dog whistle these things in from a psychic ability.
Yeah, I've heard people say that.
And I think that there's something there. Otherwise, they wouldn't necessarily be able to provide some of the video evidence that they have. But then that also brings up the question of if these things are interdimensional, which we've had witnesses testify to members of Congress, and that was all publicly out there. That would then bring up the whole, well, if this is really transcending dimension, the power of what you say, thought, all of that. And then, you can look into our own government's declassified documents that the CIA had on different experiments. I mean, you can literally, last week I was going through, actually on a Friday night, just put my son down, and I was going through some of the declassified, you go to cia.gov/reading room and you can see all the declassified documents. And so I believe it was called Stargate, and it was talking about, the basically psychological experiments where they were trying to basically remote view and all that. Why would our own government be looking into that if there wasn't something there? And so I'm appreciative to all that information being publicly out there, but I think this whole idea and stigma of trying to make it sound crazy when people actually have these questions, that needs to stop, which is why the task force is in existence. And then also, too, they need to release information.
If I was going to play devil's advocate, I would say that the government would look into that to find out if there's anything there. And that would probably take a long time if they're really being careful. So if I was going to fund a program, if someone told me that there's some people in Russia that can remote view military sites in America, I'd be like, are you sure? And like, yeah, there's a technique involved, and we know the technique, and we want to fund some sort of a study to see if we can do it. I'm like, let's go. What do you need? Because if maybe it's real. So I don't buy that they wouldn't spend money on it unless it's real. I say they would spend money on it to find out if you're really looking out for national security, right? You've got 300 and plus million people that you're responsible for. You got to dot your I's and cross your T's. And like, if I'm, if I'm good at my job and I'm not an egomaniac, I'm going to go, maybe there's some shit I don't know.
Well, there's looking into it, and then there's expanding, right? And so if you look at all those declassified files, you can pull up, and this is just wild, but there's one where I was looking through, and they had basically, the Coast Guard had called in. There was a ship that they had been given information on that was running drugs. And so they called in one of their remote viewers, and they're trying to give coordinates of the ship and actually, basically locate these things. And I actually was laughing because I was reading this off the website, and I'm telling my husband, I'm like, imagine, you're trying to run drugs, and then all of a sudden you have some weirdo at Langley or in a basement. They're like, nope, just here's the coordinates, beam me up, Scotty. But
yeah, I don't know if they write things down or type them out or what, but I talked to Hal Putoff about it, and he said they used it to very specifically find the location of a downed Russian craft within a couple kilometers, which is nuts. If you think about the area where this thing crashed, it's remote wilderness, the middle of nowhere. Russia hadn't found it yet. And apparently we found it first, according to Hal Putoff. It's just because I haven't done it and because I don't know that it's real doesn't mean it's not real. And this is a problem with people. They don't want to get duped, and they don't want to look stupid. They don't want to look naive. And so they dismiss things. They dismiss that there might be frequencies that you don't tune into all the time, and someone might get really good at that, and they might be able to see things remotely.
Well, I think that this gets into the bigger discussion of what do we know, right? Going back to some of these books that were moved. There's a good podcast right now called The Autistic Tapes, and it talks about how some non-speaking or non-verbal autistic kids actually are exhibiting telepathy.
You mean the telepathy tapes?
Yeah, the telepathy tapes. Non-verbal autistic kids are exhibiting telepathy. This concept, again, if you were to talk about it 20 years ago, people will call you crazy, but I think based on what we're seeing now, based on the fact that our own government's looked into it, based on the stuff that you were saying, you can find all this information publicly available and it's out there. And I think that there's something to it. And so, we're seeing, and we've heard, this is in non-classified settings, we've heard from people that have come forward that are saying, we're being able to, via meditation, we're essentially downloading information. We can communicate with these things. Granted, when I'm sitting in my congressional office and I'm hearing this, I take it with a grain of salt because we do get a lot of crazy people. But when you have people that are high-level executives, very successful, clean-cut, not on drugs, they're coming in and they're telling you this stuff, and then, you're kind of cross-referencing it with various people in intelligence agencies, I think that there's something there, and we need to be at least open to hearing the discussion and the argument for these things.
Oh, for sure. Like I said, if there's a photo out there, I think you owe humanity a service. You're supposed to release that photograph. There's no reason why a small group of people in the government should have photo-conclusive evidence that aliens are real.
And that's
crazy.
And there's an overclassification aspect of this too, right? If you're serving in the military and you're taking a photo on your personal device or a video on your personal device, that shouldn't be the purview of the federal government. And either which way, there's been now so much stuff. There's been a lot of fake stuff put out there. But the stuff that is legitimate that we are seeing, the stuff that we had people testify to in our congressional hearings, that's not a joke. And what's even more interesting to this is that I was actually able to talk to David Grush, who now is actually working with the task force to kind of chase down a lot of these leads in regards to some of these contractors that allegedly have this tech, right? So in talking with him, again, not in a skiff, we were able to actually flesh out that prior to him testifying that he actually received very real threats against his life and his wife's life. He's a sound guy, and then shortly after he testified, there was this massive smear operation that was launched against him to try to discredit his testimony. And so, again, going into, if this stuff wasn't real or if he wasn't telling the truth, why would there be this massively orchestrated effort to, completely just disprove what he was trying to say or to discredit his actions and his testimony? And so it is kind of coming full circle, right? Going back to what the task force has been able to find out. I mean, we're conducting these investigations simultaneously, and we're doing this in addition to everything that to everything else that we have to do as members of Congress, right? So although I would love to just dedicate my full time and attention to this, we still have to balance it out. And so I've, again, had some great investigators who are working with us on oversight, as well as a lot of cooperation from the intelligence agencies. And we are going to be asking for this information to be declassified, at least information that has been shown to us.
I think the first break in the wall was that 2017 New York Times report where they were talking about it in logical, sensible language that these things might be from another world. But I think that movie that you're discussing, which is The Age of Disclosure,
yeah,
right?
I haven't seen it. Have you seen it?
It's very good.
Yeah.
It's very good. It's very good, and it doesn't even have any like UFO footage. I mean, maybe like a little bit.
It's just testimony.
It's just testimony. And at the end of it, you kind of draw this conclusion like, oh, this makes sense. Like this, what they're essentially saying is one of the problems is if they have been funding these secret programs, then for all these years, they've been misappropriating money.
Oh, yeah. And they've been lying to Congress.
And that's
Jinx.
Super illegal.
Very illegal.
It's
but, you know,
super
it's like,
illegal.
is Congress going to do anything about it? Because it's not the first time. Like, we have the ability, and this is the most frustrating thing. So as this is my second term in Congress now. But as a first-term member of Congress, you know, when you get elected to Congress, you would think that they would bring you in and they'd say, okay, this is how you do the legislation. No, you get elected, you show up to kind of a crash course for about like a week and a half on, you know, how to not get in trouble with ethics. And then you're basically wined and dined by lobbyists. They don't actually tell you how to do the legislation. Basically, the only rules that you're told are never vote down a rule, which is a procedural motion to bring legislation to the floor, and don't really ever vote against your party, of which within the first week, I broke both rules. And so I was on the naughty list, per usual. But the thing is
They
that
tell you how to do it. That's kind of crazy.
Well, they tell you basically those are the two rules, and don't go against that, and you won't have any issues.
Those are big ass rules, though.
Yeah, because it's like, you know, you're supposed to represent your constituency. So if you have people calling your office saying, "Don't you vote for this," and then you vote against it, it's like people forget that you're supposed to represent, right, representative instead of just do what the party wants. But you know, there are mechanisms that have existed since Thomas Jefferson, who wrote our damn rule manual, that enable us to actually pass legislation and actually hold agencies and people accountable from a punitive perspective. And I don't know if you were tracking, but like I brought a vote on the former attorney general for basically refusing to testify to Congress and respond to a subpoena. And that was called inherent contempt. And a lot of Congress is like, what the hell is inherent contempt? It hadn't been done since the early 1900s. And I actually read it in the rule manual, and I read the rule manual twice. So it's like so crazy what happens when you read books. But we were able to find this out, and it was a mechanism that Congress can use to actually basically send the sergeant at arms to go arrest people.
Jeez. Okay. So one of the things that this documentary was calling for that I think is the only logical way to solve this is a mass amnesty for these people that misappropriated money and
or whistleblowers.
Well, the whistleblowers thing is crazy. Like, they leave them alone. Like, come on. Of course, everybody should fucking know this stuff, guys. The real crime is you keeping this secret from humanity. That's the real crime. Okay? The other stuff is horseshit. It's just interpretations of what you're writing down on paper. You're making up rules. Mm-hmm. But if you ask the general public how they feel this should go, a rational, normal person would say, there's no fucking way the defense contractor should be the only people who know that we're not alone. Fuck you.
Especially
That's
when we're
crazy.
facing a massive deficit and you see that they're like the Pentagon hasn't been able to pass the audit and I don't know how many years.
All that stuff is
so
great,
crazy.
but just for humanity, that is a giant piece of information that no one should have. No one should secretly keep information that would change our entire perspective on our existence.
It's definitely wrong that it's happening, for sure. What I will tell you, though, is the issue that we have with bringing forward legislation that would give mass amnesty and pardon to these people is that there are people within the intelligence community and within Congress on both sides that will try to, if you come forward with this, and I'll tell you a very prime example of this in a moment, that they will block it. They don't want it to pass. They will stop it from even coming to the floor. They won't bring legislation that will address it because they want to keep this information secret. So Representative Tim Burchett...
But why do they want to keep the information secret?
Because I think that their mouthpiece is in control of the deep state. And that's a thing. And it exists on both sides, okay?
So someone will come to them with marching orders.
100%. Representative Tim Burchett, before I got elected, was kind of on his own little island in regards to the UAP stuff. And he will himself tell you that, this is 100% like a thing, and that these defense contractors and what he believes, the Pentagon not passing audits, all this, these black budget programs. I mean, like, he will tell you he's, again, been leading out this effort way before I got there. He had a piece of legislation that was supposed to enable the FAA to report and develop a different reporting procedure for UAP stuff. And at the time, the chairman of Intel ensured that legislation was not brought forward, that it was stopped. The piece of legislation that actually passed out of the Senate, it really had no teeth to it. And then Representative Burchett drew a primary challenger that was being backed by the chairman of Intel. And so, when you are touching these, it's like, that meme where you have that stork that's like, don't touch this, and then the little foot comes out.
Yeah.
It's kind of like what we're doing, and it's not exactly easy because you will take heat from both sides. But it has been a good group that's been assembled that's bicameral, meaning it's both in the House and the Senate, and bipartisan, meaning both Democrats and Republicans are saying, like, hey, this should actually happen.
Are they publicly talking about not releasing the information, or is all this stuff done in secrecy?
It's done behind the scenes.
Because if they had to do it publicly, if they had to announce their position on it publicly, it would be very damaging, I think, to anybody's political career on the right or the left.
People would be pissed, right?
Well, they're pissed. Yeah. Well, because I'm pissed, because if they've had it for this long, I mean, if they really did recover something as early as 1947, excuse me.
Well, what I can tell you is for us specifically, we actually were made aware. Some people had come forward that said that they wanted to brief. So about 2 years ago when all this kicked off, we had requested briefings from Arrow that's in charge of kind of compiling the investigative aspect of UAP stuff. And by the way, from the get-go, even in talking to Arrow, I was like, this organization is literally a BS organization. They're never going to tell us anything. And every interaction that we had in the skiff, I was like, this is a nothing burger. But then these people came forward and said that they were actually they were told to not brief our group specifically on this topic, and that it was from, at the time, members of House leadership, but they wouldn't say who. And so I actually went with another member of Congress and confronted multiple people, and they all denying us access. So it's done behind the scenes. You'll see these random little troll blockages that might pop up. But what I can tell you is that with the new administration, specifically with the FBI, specifically with ODNI, we have gotten transparency to where previously we would have been stonewalled. We were actually given briefings. And so what I will tell you is we are going to push for the information that we saw to be out there for the American people to see.
So do you think that the whole idea of disclosure is maybe a multiple step, very agonizing, frustratingly slow process rather than a big dump of all the information that they've had from Roswell to the Aztec one to apparently there's a whole slew. I don't know if it's Aztec. I forget the name of it. But there was another during that same time period. There was a really prominent UFO recovery thing that was not as publicized as the one in Roswell. The big mistake with the Roswell one was the newspaper printed it. And so then they had to backtrack, and then they had to do the press conference where they had like some scattered pieces of a weather balloon that didn't look anything like a UFO.
And then the Air Force was like, yeah, it was nothing.
Yeah, but meanwhile, they flew the wreckage to Wright Field. They flew the wreckage, and Truman met them there, supposedly.
Well, I can tell you in our hearing, we were actually notified, and you can pull this up. I think it was one of the witnesses had talked about what had happened at Vandenberg Air Base, where there was this thing that appeared over the base. It actually had multiple blotters reporting on it from phone calls into law enforcement from like hundreds of people. And whatever had appeared over the base was basically bigger than a football field and basically a red cube with some weird thing in the center of it. I actually had our witness draw this out. This guy is sober as a priest. I mean, was a great pilot, and he's talking about all this. And so, you talk about this stuff, it seems like a sci-fi movie, but based on the evidence that we've seen, I don't have any reason to believe that these people are lying. Based on the evidence that I've seen from our own government, I think that there's something there that the American people deserve to have access to. And so this is not just on this topic, but again, in other topics as well, this has been my perspective, is transparency is what builds trust. Other governments have revealed certain information on it. To think that we are the only, life form on this planet or in this galaxy, I think is a little bit crazy, given, the fact that I also think God exists and that there's other creations. But then again, you get into this aspect of, why is it that you also have this aspect of, a certain religion that has been very controlled and I think rolled out in a certain aspect. And, when you have certain books that are removed because they don't think that people should have access to this information or know it, why remove a book from a Bible, right?
Did Wes Huff, did he touch on that? Did he talk about that? Are there people that don't believe the Book of Enoch was really a part of the Bible?
I don't remember how he discussed the missing books.
Yeah,
I think we brought it up, but I don't remember how.
That's the guy to talk to.
Yeah, so what I gather...
That's the guy to talk to about, you know what I mean? Because you have to really understand the history of the Bible to be able to figure out what's legitimate, what's not, why they put it into the New Testament. I had some very erroneous ideas about it until I talked to intelligent people that really know the history of it. And it's very strange stuff.
Well, so from what I gather, and by the way, I'm not a theologian in any capacity, but just from my personal opinion on this. So you have the Ethiopian Orthodox text, which has, I think, 88 books of the Bible in total. But in the Ethiopian Orthodox text, it's basically kind of like a mainline OG version of the Bible. And then sometime in the 4th century, there was actually a group that came together and they removed certain books. And the story goes that Revelations actually had replaced Enoch. And so it's interesting because when you're looking kind of full circle on, you hear the stuff that some of these people are talking about, and then you see and you read the Book of Enoch, which is a wild read, okay? And then you look at kind of what our modern day description is of what angels and entities are versus what Enoch was seeing and reporting in his language and ability at that time. I think that there's a lot that brings you to then ask the question, well, why would they remove this information? If it's truly, written in part of the oldest Bible in the world, why would they then take it out and water it down? And I'm not saying that you can't find God through the new Bible, right? Like everyone's on their own spiritual journey, and I think everyone can pray and you can access God. But I just find that very interesting. And so what I will say is that I like to have the whole kind of picture in front of me. And so I feel like to fully understand A through Z, you kind of have to be able to read it.
In the Book of Enoch are also in the Bible, and that it's one of the craziest stories. It's one of the craziest origin stories ever, that angels came down and bred with humans and made giants.
Right.
The giants destroyed the earth. Like, what is this story?
It's mostly in the Hebrew Bible. It's the story of what led to the flood. Yeah, the sons of Elohim.
What a strange concept, that angels came down and bred with humans.
It's a very weird idea. Well, there's different ways to look at translating B'nai Elohim. It might be, the first word, B'nai, means the sons of. So it kind of revolves on what's the meaning of Elohim. So it could be God with a big G, could be God with a small g, could be angels, could be dignitaries in a government like judges. Yeah, so the less far out kind of interpretation of that phrase or that term is the sons of the mighty, the sons of the judges, the sons of the renowned people, as opposed to the sons of angels or the sons of God.
Okay, so how do you interpret the Watchers? What do you think that could be?
I think, they're not mentioned in the Hebrew Bible. They are mentioned in the Book of Enoch. That's a crazy book, isn't it?
It's crazy.
Yeah, I started reading it, and I said to my wife, I can't handle this. It's too much.
It's because if that was left in the Bible, if they decided that that was like a part of the canon, that would change everything.
Well, in what way?
It's the craziest story ever. That these things came down and bred with humans and created giants, and the giants destroyed and consumed everything.
Yeah, those giants.
And consumed each other. Like,
yeah, bloodshed.
What kind of kooky story is this? Like, what is this?
Well, it's the reason for the flood,
Right.
and all that. Yeah. So, things just got so bad, God said, I changed my mind. And he brings the flood.
It's like the further you go back, the crazier the story gets.
I know. Well, the Book of Enoch was written maybe 125 BCE. So it's pretty old. But some of the stories that originate, or that the origination of some of the stories in the Hebrew Bible, go back, 10,000 years perhaps.
Wow. Wouldn't you have loved to be a fly on the wall 10,000 years ago to go, what were you guys writing down? What really happened?
What really happened? Well, I mean,
it seems like for sure something happened.
What?
Well, whatever the whole Jesus Christ thing was, it seems like that was a real event.
Right, as opposed to the flood.
The flood seems like a real event too. Don't you think the flood was a real event?
What about, let's see.
I think the flood was the Younger Dryas impact. I think likely, obviously. I don't know what I'm talking about. But my inclination is to believe guys like Randall Carlson, because it's a very compelling narrative. Like what he's saying is, we pass through a comet storm. It happens this particular time every year. And there's been times in history where we've been hit. And it's very likely that this time period, this Younger Dryas impact time period, that could have been the end of whatever civilization existed at the time, and what we are is a rebuilding of it. We just kind of forgot about it. And it doesn't make sense that you could forget, like, how they built the pyramids, but they did. Like, it seems like there was really advanced people at one point in time.
Yeah.
Something horrible happened, and then it took a while for people to bounce back. And we're the direct linear progression of the people like from Mesopotamia and Iraq and all that. That's us now. But before that, there was probably something really wild.
Yeah. Well, if you look at the text's description of the generations from Adam to Noah, what civilization was like between the beginning and the time of the end. Yeah, I mean, it became filled with violence. And, God just, said, forget it. Yeah, so that's one way of looking at the Younger Dryas, I suppose. This is what it looks like when God changes his mind.
Sure. That also could have been like the Yucatan impact, right? God's like, we can't get anywhere with these fucking dinosaurs everywhere. Just boom.
Yeah.
But he got tired of lizards running the world for a couple, he maybe gave it a couple 100 million years. Figure it out, guys. And then they have to reset.
Yeah, but what comes after us, I wonder, in 200 million years?
I think it's most likely digital.
Yeah.
I think we're transferring what the idea of what a life form is. What does a life form do? We want to think that it has to be just like us. And I don't think necessarily that's true. I think we might be giving birth to something we didn't anticipate would be a life.
Yeah, a very cool book I try to mention as often as possible is called The First and Last Men by Olaf Stapledon. And he talks about 19 species of man. And this is the first one. It's a story spans 2 billion years. It's this huge story.
Whoa.
Yeah, and it's mostly through genetic engineering. Make people bigger, smarter, like brains that occupy a football field. That's one of the species of man. Yeah, so his thought is that it occurs biologically, through genetic manipulation.
Just over time, naturally?
After a while, it gets steered. Yeah, let me think. Yeah, it's all basically based on what people are, what people want. So there's one species that instead of love as kind of the core valued feeling, they have hate as their core value feeling.
They just can't wait to hate.
Yeah. And that's one of the species that kind of goes through
Wow.
a period of, rise and then decline, obviously. It just couldn't sustain itself.
Well, you got to wonder, like, how long this is, if AI really is a thing, it really is a life, we've got to make a compelling argument why AI is bad and we are good.
Yeah,
because if people say, if you really want to be ethical and moral, this is a horrible take, but if you really want to be ethical and moral, you'd be like, people are like uniquely terrible. Like, if we just gave in and became digital life, we could ensure there'd be no more suffering.
How can you know that?
You can't. You can't know a vaccine is safe and effective. You can't.
You just have to try it.
You got to try it
and see what happens.
I think a bunch of people try it. I don't know how much further like biological people can go while we're making digital people that are way better than us at basically everything.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's too far away from being a reality.
The way I try to follow it is through a biblical lens.
Really?
Yeah, like, how does
What
this...
chapter are we in right now?
Yeah, well, good question. You read the prophets like Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel. They just rage against the machine. So I think it goes pretty far back.
Damn.
Yeah, so what's good and bad? What's right and wrong? How do we decide that? That's what I like about the Bible. I mean, obviously, I can make up my own mind about things, but it's nice having that kind of an option, that kind of a tradition to refer to when deciding what's good and bad. What you should do and what you shouldn't do.
Yeah.
There's supposed to be over 600. They're translated as commandments in the Hebrew Bible, but and those are what you do to live happily and attain a spiritual state close to God, prophetic, a state of prophecy. If it's a certain description of the world and how to interact with it, which is intended to have certain effects and discourage other, decisions. So this is good, this is bad, in terms of this will increase things in your life that are good, and this will decrease them. So it's a very interesting description of cause and effect. That's the way I see those so-called commandments. They're more of a description of how things are run. If you do this, then that'll happen. If you do this, then that'll happen.
Do you think that they were directly given to us by a god, or do you think that this is just the memories of how to keep society together that they have just eventually written down?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. Does it come from outside of you or from inside of you?
Right.
Yeah. If it's available inside of you, but hidden away, then prophecy, or really getting it correctly according to the text, would just be an uncovering or stimulation of what's already inside of you, as opposed to
you can achieve some sort of a state.
It's information latent. Could be in the DNA or whatnot, or it comes down from a higher source.
But so like when you're interpreting stories in the Bible, like Moses and the Ten Commandments, how are you imagining this event happening, or are you imagining what were they trying to record? Like, what were they trying to remember? Because it seems like by the time they're writing it down, it's quite a bit after the actual event. There's
Really?
a lot of that stuff that's really, really freaky. And then you get into old religious texts, and that's when things get really freaky. You get to things like the Book of Enoch that talk about the watchers who came down from the sky and created
clearly
humans.
a lot of unusual stuff happened a long time ago.
Yes.
A long time ago.
And we don't have a good record of it.
Yeah.
We just have what we know. And what we know, we get very arrogant about. We know what happened 300 years ago.
That's a really good
400
point.
Yes.
Of what we know, we get very arrogant about.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's
And
also
anything else we don't.
these
accept.
academics and these people that are in charge of the narrative, like the people in Egypt, where they're very arrogant and they're gatekeepers because their whole identity is based on them being the ones that explain to the world how these incredible sites were produced. And if something comes along that is counter to that narrative, they fight it. They fight it because it's part of them. It's their identity.
When I spoke to Filippo Biondi, I talked to one of my cousins in Italy. I spent a lot of my time in Italy when I was younger. One of them, she was younger than I was when I was there, but she's now become a respected archaeologist in Rome, and she's an Egyptologist. Okay? And I went out to Italy to visit family, and I was sitting at the table. This is not even that long ago. And she's sitting next to me, and I mean, I remember her from being a kid. And she nudged me at the table. Her family's all academic. Everybody's a doctor or scientist or something like that. So there's always that pride of the science. And she nudges me, and in Italian she says, "I'm really interested in what you do, what you're looking into." And I knew what she meant. It was about UFOs. And I just responded, I'm even more interested in what you know about what's out there in Egypt. And she looked at me and she says, "We don't really know all of it. She said, a lot of it makes no sense." But she said it whispering because she knew that that's not well seen at the table, because now she's going to come across as this pseudoscience type of like, oh my God, she's going to come out of the mainstream, So, and then she went to her place, and I was still there. We were there for a couple of days. She came and gave me a little book, and in Italian, I don't know how to say it. The missing. I don't know how to say it in English, but the missing Vangelo, like the missing scriptures, basically. It's a little book in Italian about the missing scriptures that are not in the Bible, that speak of things that are not convenient for what we are arrogant to think we understand.
And one of the fascinating things about these missing scriptures is they found them alongside existing scriptures. So when they found the Dead Sea Scrolls in Qumran, so they found these in a cave in Qumran. And it's kind of a crazy thing. Like someone threw a rock and hit a clay pot and heard the shattering of a clay pot. So they threw a rock into this high cave and realized there was something in there. And then they started looking. And then they found these scrolls that were in these clay pots. Inside the scrolls, they found the Book of Isaiah. It was 1,000 years older than the oldest version of the Book of Isaiah that we had ever found. And it's identical, verbatim, to the Book of Isaiah that is currently in the Bible. Along with it is the Book of Enoch. And the Book of Enoch is fucking squirrely.
The Book of Enoch is squirrely.
Yeah.
And
that's a good way to describe it.
just a few rabbis decided that the Book of Enoch was too weird because it didn't jive with the Torah, so they left it out of the biblical canon.
That's right.
That's why it's not taught. But the Book of Enoch is readily available. You could read it. And it's also in the Ethiopian Bible. The Ethiopian Bible includes the Book of Enoch.
Really?
Yes. And those are the people that supposedly are in possession of the Ark of the Covenant.
The Ark of the Covenant, yeah.
Which is like, Graham Hancock talks about it. There's like a person is set to, like, they have a job of watching the Ark of the Covenant, but it's known that it's going to kill them. So they all get cataracts and cancer and they all wind up dying.
Like bad things. Yeah, that's
well, it
right.
has some sort of radiation, apparently, and they exhibit signs of radiation poisoning when these people are designed to be the curators.
Where is the Ark of the Covenant
In
supposed
Ethiopia.
to be?
Supposedly in Ethiopia.
So you guys think that's...
I mean, I'm very...
I think it's ancient technology. I think it's probably
Yeah.
ancient technology. It's probably some completely not understood ancient technology.
No, I'm not discounting it. I'm just wondering.
Well, I like
Yeah.
the fact that you're skeptical, even though you have the craziest fucking story of all time. But it speaks to your integrity. It really does. Because you're not a guy who believes kooky shit. So for you, a guy who doesn't believe kooky shit is a hard, rational scientist who's an engineer who's done things like put a rocket engine in the back of a fucking Honda, and then, or a hydrogen-powered Corvette, and then you go and see these things. You're like, wait, what the fuck is this thing you have
Look,
in this
I
hangar?
worship technology.
Right.
Nothing else.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, to hear something like that, do you think that actually exists?
I don't know. Graham
you
Hancock
think-
is convinced it exists. It's very
Yeah.
carefully guarded, and these people have been guarding it for centuries.
I mean,
there's
it's
just too many-
throughout history, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, there's too many missing pieces of the puzzle to really say one way or another. I don't think
whether or
there's-
not it was just
Yeah.
mythology or
Right.
an actual...
Yeah.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
But it is weird that he's talked to these people that have these fucking cataracts, and these people all say the same thing. They die. The people that are designed or that are designated to be the curators of this particular religious
I
object.
relate this back to the. I think I told you the first time we met. If somebody found a nuclear reactor
Right.
Yeah.
back at that time,
Right.
and they took it apart, they just would drop dead.
Right.
From
Exactly.
the
Yeah.
magically
Right.
from that, and anybody that came in to check on them would also die, and they go, "This is evil. It's cursed or whatever."
Or
and
something that you're not supposed to have access to because
right,
it's divine.
or some other. Yeah,
Yes.
right. And could this be something at another level?
Yes.
That I have to say, and I'm no one to say it, but I struggle with divine stuff because I'm like, this craft or this technology. I mean, our phones to somebody 1,000 years ago
Yes.
would look like some divine object. I mean, it's technology
Clearly,
to us.
yeah.
So we have to be very cautious in, like, I'm not saying there is no divine something. Maybe there is, we don't know. But I think technology really could mask itself as divine power. if it's-
100%.
Yeah.
Or divine energy itself could be technology
True.
taken to its final form.
If categories dissolve, especially fundamental ones, the culture is dissolving because the culture is a structure of category. That's what it is.
Right.
So, and in fact, culture is a structure of category that we all share. So we see things the same way. Well, that's why we can talk. I mean, not exactly the same way, because then we'd have nothing to talk about. But roughly speaking, we have a bedrock of agreement. That's the Bible, by the way. So I just walked through the Museum of the Bible in Washington. That was very cool. It's a very cool museum.
So the structure, that's what the Bible
Yeah, it's what I figured out.
provides.
I just figured this out this week. So it was a cool thing to walk through because it's chronological. They have one floor which is the history of the Bible. But it's not exactly that. It's really what it is the history of the book. Now, in many ways, the first book was the Bible. I mean, literally, because at one point there was only one book. Like, as far as our Western culture is concerned, there was one book. And for a while, literally, there was only one book. And that book was the Bible. And then before it was the Bible, it was it was scrolls and it was writings on papyrus. But we were starting to aggregate written text together. And it went through all sorts of technological transformations. And then it became books that everybody could buy, the book everybody could buy. And the first one of those was the Bible. And then it became all sorts of books that everybody could buy. But all those books, in some sense, emerged out of that underlying book. And that book itself, the Bible isn't a book, it's a library. It's a collection of books. And so what I figured out was, partly because I was talking to my brother-in-law, Jim Keller, who's the world's greatest chip designer and has now designed a chip that's as powerful as the human brain, which is optimized for artificial intelligence learning, by the way. And so I talked to him about that. He said, "You heard of the internet?" I said, "Yeah, Jim, I've heard of the internet." He said, "This is way more revolutionary than that." So in any case, we were talking about meaning in text because we were talking about translation and the problem of understanding text. And Jim said, the meaning of words is coded in the relationship of the words to one another. And the postmodernists make that case, that all meaning is derived from the relationship between words. That's wrong because well, what about rage? That's not words. And what about moving your hand? That's not words. So it's wrong, but part of it's right, because the meaning we derive from the verbal domain is encoded in the relationship between words. So now then you think, well, let's think about the relationship between words. Well, some words are dependent on other words. Some ideas are dependent on other ideas. The more ideas are dependent on a given idea, the more fundamental that idea is. That's a definition of fundamental. So now imagine you have an aggregation of texts in a civilization. You say, which are the fundamental texts? And the answer is the texts upon which most other texts depend. And so you'd put Shakespeare way in there in English, because so many texts are dependent on Shakespeare's literary revelations. And Milton would be in that category, and Dante would be in that category, at least in translation. Fundamental authors, part of the Western canon, not because of the arbitrary dictates of power, but because those texts influenced more other texts. And then you think about that as a hierarchy, okay, with the Bible at its base, which is certainly the case. Now imagine that's the entire corpus of linguistic production, all things considered. Now, how do you understand that? Like, literally, how do you understand that? The answer is you sample it by reading and listening to stories and listening to people talk. You sample that whole domain. You build a low-resolution representation of that inside you, and then you listen and see through that. And so it isn't that the Bible is true. It's that the Bible is the precondition for the manifestation of truth, which makes it way more true than just true. It's a whole different kind of true. And I think this is not only literally the case, factually, I think it can't be any other way. It's the only way we can solve the problem of perception.
You know, like subtitled movies, you feel like you're a smarter person watching a movie where you're reading it as well.
Yeah. And there's something about the written word that's like, it's a pretty interesting thing to throw into the mix. I know when I first started it was kind of confusing, but then I got really good at it. And I think, especially with something like the Passion that I did, the written word was very important because it was, you got all those books, the Bible, you've got the different Gospels and stuff that people are quite familiar with. Half the time, they didn't even need to read the subtitles. They could look at it and know what was going on.
That was a crazy movie because it was a great movie, but it seemed like there was resistance to that movie.
Oh, yeah. No, there was...
which I thought was very strange. There was like Hollywood resistance to that movie. Like people didn't like that you were making it, it seemed like.
Yeah, there was a lot of opposition to it. And... I don't know. I think if you ever hit on that subject matter, you're going to get people going because,
of course,
it's big subject matter, and it's like, And my contention is, when I was making it, it was like you're making this film, and the idea was that we're all responsible for this. That his sacrifice was for all mankind, and that for all our ills and all the things in our fallen nature. It was a redemption. So, and I believe that, I actually am, I was born into a Catholic family. I'm very Christian in my beliefs, So I do actually believe this stuff to the full. So depicting that was an honor, but it was also, you got the daylights beat out of you for it.
Yeah, because there's resistance, first of all, from secular Hollywood, where for whatever reason, Christianity is the one religion that you're allowed to disparage.
Yeah.
Christianity is the one religion where people, all these progressive, open-minded, leftist people, they'll embrace all these different religions until it comes to Christianity. And for whatever reason, that represents like white male, whatever it represents, colonialism, whatever it represents, it's negative.
Yeah, sure, it's gotten a bad rap. And people do feel free to beat up on it. Mm-hmm. Even I do when I see it's like, when it's not fair or when I think it's off.
Right.
Like, when they appoint some cardinal in some diocese and he's been covering up for like people who are child molesters.
Yes.
Or, like Theodore McCarrick or Cardinal Wuerl or those kind of guys. I mean.
Or the Pope.
Yes, absolutely. I'm
Benedict.
Not Benny. Well, he was covering up, but so is the guy now.
Is he really?
Well, yeah. Yeah. It's not great.
I thought he was like the more progressive pope.
Oh, he's very progressive, yes.
But he's covering up for stuff as well. Well, they all are. I mean, it's a dark institution in a lot of ways because it's history. You know.
Well, you know, the institution, it was instituted by Christ, you know, but that doesn't mean that it can't be flawed. And there's a school of thought that says it isn't what it purports to be anymore. It's moved away from what it was intended to be and what it is. Almost, there's a guy called Bishop Vigano who says it's a counterfeit parallel church, and it's running an entirely different religion. I actually don't adhere to a post-conciliar church. I adhere.
Can you define what that means?
Okay. There was an event that happened in the 60s. First, there was an event in the Vatican where they elected John the 23rd Pope, right, in 1958. I was 2 years old, right? He was elected, and there was a very funny thing that happened in the conclave. You know, usually there's white and black smoke that goes out of the chimneys to tell you, we have a pope, you know, habemus papam, you know. And the white smoke came out. And everybody cheered, and they went crazy. And then about a half an hour later, black smoke came out. That never in history has that happened, that the white smoke came out, and then the black smoke came
So
out.
white smoke means we found a new pope. Black smoke means no pope.
That's right. They'd have votes, or there'd be one reason or another. They'd have a round in the conclave, and black smoke would come out many times maybe. Maybe it would take 2 weeks. But never was it known that white smoke came out, then black smoke came out.
So what was the scenario?
That somebody was elected, and that maybe something else happened, and he was pushed aside and someone else was put in. So it was
Power struggle.
some kind of power struggle. And, of course, the man who came out was a man called Angelo Roncalli, and he was John the 23rd. Now, it's interesting to note that never had a pope taken the name of another pope ever before in history. But this man took the name of a known anti-pope from the 15th century that Cosimo de' Medici put in there as his own man. I'll get you in the chair, and then everything will be rosy. You know, everything will go good for business, you know, whatever he was putting him in there for, some corrupt reason. But and there have been corrupt men in that place before. I mean, there's Alexander VI and Julius II and Sixtus IV. I mean, some of these guys are, you know, they're not saints. So he took the name of a known anti-pope from the 5th century who actually said, yes, I'm an anti-pope. Sorry, I'm not the right guy, because there was more than one, and he confessed to being, and he wanted to, you know, square things with the Almighty, I guess, so he confessed to being an anti-pope. And so he took the same name as that guy, John the 23rd. So it's interesting, don't you think? I mean, why would he do that?
Well, whenever you have that kind of power, like I'm sure you've been to the Vatican, right?
Yeah.
It's stunning.
Yes, it's huge.
It's so crazy. When you're walking around, you see just the massive amount, just the dollar value in the art that they possess.
Yeah.
It's fucking insane.
It's crazy. Yeah. And, you know, it's a very small country. It's a country.
Yeah, it's a country inside of a small city.
Yeah.
Because Rome's not the biggest city.
No.
And then it's got a country inside the city.
Yeah.
With walls around it.
Sure.
And you can't extradite people.
Yeah. Pretty weird.
How convenient.
Yeah. Even Ratzinger, he didn't drive from the Vatican to the other place. He flew.
Ooh.
And it was only a little while, because who knows why. I don't know.
Well, he was wanted.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, he had done, one of the things that he had done was he had moved a priest that had molested 100 kids, and he moved him to some new place where he molested deaf kids.
Yeah, yeah. Boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
That's the dirtiest, most evil practice that the Catholic Church has been accused of.
I think so, and many institutions as well,
Yeah.
but that is a very bad one. And I think it's all part and parcel of the same corruption that crept in. And when you asked what's the difference between pre-Vatican II, so Vatican II happened, and of course they took the church and they reformed it, and they changed things in it. and it didn't necessarily agree with everything that went before it.
Mm.
And up to that point, yeah, you could find it agreed with itself. But all of a sudden, you got something else, to the point where now, I mean, we got a pope that brought a South American idol into the church to worship.
Really?
He did. The Pachamama. He bought the South American, and he got.
I don't know what that is.
It's kind of like a South American god, Pachamama.
Why would he do that?
Good question. But he did.
Did he have an explanation for why he did it?
Yeah, it's kind of a weasel-worded thing of like, oh, all religions are just as good as one another. But, you know, if that's his contention.
He shouldn't be the Pope.
No. I mean,
how can you be the Pope if you say all religions are just as good?
Yeah, we all worship, you know. So, yeah, there's a Pachamama. There you go.
So he brought that in.
Yeah, into the Vatican. Then the hierarchy even worshipped. They had a ceremony around it outside.
What?
So, well, that constitutes apostasy.
Yeah.
That's an apostasy move, all right?
Worshipping false gods.
Yeah. That's number one on the Mosaic hit list. You know? Moses goes up on the mountain. He comes back down. People are worshiping a golden calf.
Yeah.
You know, it's that.
Yeah.
So you can't do that. And for me, that's a departure from... you know, that's called apostasy.
Right.
That's a falling away from it. And the very nature of apostasy means that you have to be part of it to fall away from it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an inside job.
Ah. So what do you think there's a motive behind these things?
I don't think well, probably.
What do you think it is?
I don't know. But it isn't good. I think we're looking at a world where and this is in the next film I'm going to do, I'm going to try and tackle this question. That there are big realms, spiritual realms. There's good, there's evil, and they are slugging it out for the souls of mankind. And my question is, why are we even important? Little old flawed humanity, why are we important in that process where the big realms are slugging it out over us? And I think there's bigger things at play here. And institutions that purport to touch on the divine are necessarily going to be affected by that slugfest that's going on between good and evil.
Right.
And
sometimes good gives up ground.
Yeah. And maybe not on purpose.
So this story that you want to tell about good and evil, like, do you have a script, or is it just a thing in your head? What is it?
Yeah, it's the resurrection story, but it's not linear, because you can't really. It's hard to understand, so it's got to be put in a framework where you answer a few other questions as well. And you have to juxtapose the event itself against everything else so that it makes some kind of sense in a bigger picture, which is a hard thing to do. And it took my brother and I and a guy called Randall Wallace, plus my brother and I, took us 6-7 years to write it.
So are you doing this with historians as well? Are you trying to make it...
Yeah, historical stuff. Well, I regard the Gospels as history. It's verifiable history. Some people say, oh, it's a fairy tale. He never existed, but he did. And there are other accounts, verifiable historical accounts outside the biblical ones that also bear this up, that yes, he did exist. And the other aspect of that is that all the evangelists, the apostles who went out there, every single one of those guys died rather than deny their belief. And nobody dies for a lie. Nobody.
Right.
So that's part of what I'm doing. It's like showing nobody dies for a lie.
Yeah. Well, the resurrection is the one that is the most difficult for people to swallow.
Yes.
That's the one that requires the most faith.
The most faith and the most belief, resurrection.
Yeah.
Who gets back up 3 days later after he gets murdered in public, who gets back up under his own power. Buddha didn't do that shit.
Right.
So.
You believe that was a real event?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
What brought you to that belief? Is this something that you've always had, or is it something you studied it and you've come to this conclusion because of the historical accounts? And
Yes. I think as a child, one accepts things on faith because, you're raised by people who are nice to you and they believe it. And my dad was a pretty smart guy. He was like Mensa smart, like real smart. Like back in 1968, he won Jeopardy, right? And then
Really?
And then they brought all the Jeopardy winners back, and he played all the winners, and he beat all of them too. So he had a mind like a steel trap, and his memory was practically photographic. My memory is pornographic, but it's like his was like, I don't have that kind of mind.
right.
But I'm more like, he did math, and I can't add, but. So as a child, you learn these things and you accept them on faith. And I still have that faith, but as I got older, I came to it through intellect and through reading and putting things together in accounts. And then occurrences, like in my own life, I mean, just recently they verified the Shroud of Turin. Have you seen that?
I've been reading about it, and I know that there's some contention, there's some discussion and debate about it, but they used to think that it was only a couple hundred years old.
Yeah.
And now they've changed that.
Yeah, they said, no, it's back then.
They also don't understand how it was made, which to me is very fascinating because it's not paint. It's not. They don't know what caused the image itself and how that technology would have even been available.
It wasn't. No.
A couple thousand years ago.
An intense light. I mean, atomic. To leave almost like a photographic imprint on a piece of cloth.
Yeah.